Okay.
Hi everybody, thanks so much for joining in, for tuning in. I'm here, Sean Francis with TOC, and we are kicking off our first round of interviews with the candidates. So please, before we proceed, please, if you haven't liked the video or subscribed or anything, please do subscribe. If you're on YouTube, click that bell to make sure that you're notified every time we release this. But yes, let's jump right into it. I'm Sean Francis, and I'm going to be interviewing today Dr. James Gomez, who is a candidate for Sambawang with the SDP. So let's get right into it. James, tell us about yourself. I mean, oftentimes we see the politician, right, on the screens. But who are you? Who is the human being behind the candidate?
Right, thanks, Sean, and always great to be here at any form of TOC channel, and good to be here during the hustings. Yeah, my name is James. I'm a political scientist by training. I've mostly worked internationally and regionally. I do research and a bit of training, but over the years, I've been sort of in management as well. I run the Asia Center now, which is about 12 years old, with offices in Thailand, Malaysia, and Cambodia. So that's the work part. Enjoy, eating, traveling comes with the job. I still enjoy the song, so I like singing, so I do that sometime. Although I'm a bit shy to, try it out on TikTok. I've tried other things like speaking and definitely no dancing. But yeah, maybe that's something I might want to look into after the elections. Yeah.
Very nice. We'll try and set up something. Maybe we can get you
sing along on
camera. Yeah. But maybe tell us more about your academic career and what your research interests are. Right? You've published two very, very interesting books. So maybe tell us a bit more about that.
Yeah. So as a political science by training, and coming from Singapore, mostly, well read about Singapore stuff in particular. So I always felt, the edge around the analysis was not quite there. I think if you're just in academia without the practice, you can't really, get the analysis right, or sharp, So to some
extent, that has changed today, because you published your books, late 90s, early 2000s.
Yeah.
Has that evolved, or is it still?
For me, sadly, I think there are a lot of great people with a lot of great analysis. It's just my reading of the work out there. Like I said, great people, great stuff. But it doesn't excite me, because I think there's a lot more you see from a practice point of view that continues to remain unspoken.
Yes.
In the analysis about Singapore. But it's not just about Singapore. I think it's about the analysis of politics in closed society. So we can actually ripple out to even include understanding of analysis of politics in Southeast Asia. And especially, it's going to be challenging, or the analysis will not be sharp in countries that come from a one-party state, where the universities, whether it's private or public, is kind of either aligned with the state or the one party, or doesn't engage with anything political. So in that sense, I kind of stopped writing about Singapore stuff after the 90s, because it didn't excite me anymore, right? That's one thing. And secondly, I think there's a lot of writing and a lot of analysis out there which is also quite fatty, So I didn't want to join that fray to put in another piece of analysis, because I don't think it will shift the needle, so to speak. So I decided to focus where I think was relevant, which is the practice part.
I see.
Yeah.
So before we jump into that, right, can you tell us a little bit about your books, Self-Censorship and Internet Politics?
Yeah, I think, there's a story behind self-censorship because when I was studying at the NUS, I noticed that very clearly, So it was in NUS during the Tiananmen Square where I had my political awakening. I was at NUS and then I was watching TV and I saw the tanks in front of the students. And then I was studying political science, but nobody spoke about it, and I was in the Arts and Social Science faculty and nobody spoke about it. So when I decided to start a petition and pull out tables, outside of the arts canteen and, took out my foolscap paper and get people to sign a petition, the first reaction, there were two kinds of reaction. One, a whole bunch of students just came up and started signing. It was novel, right? It was novel, and a couple of them from the queue actually came up to help out. Then there was that whole kind of whisper, like, oh, what are you doing, Don't you know this is dangerous, that kind of naysaying, caution, and all of that. So I noticed a lot of this self-censorship among the student body, and this was in the late 80s. And when I left Singapore after graduation and did my master's with human rights in the UK, and I came back, I could see that self-censorship was actually all-consuming around all of society. And for me, if the university was a microcosm of society, looking at people who are in the mid-20s, early and mid-20s in the 88, and if you add another 40 years when they are in their mid to late 60s, that self-censorship is going to carry through. Yeah. So there was self-censorship, and then there was also censorship of others. Young people, and I think this is a problem up to today, and that's a good 30 years now. The parents are part of the problem. They will talk their children down saying, somebody's working in the civil service, you shouldn't speak up, shouldn't be active. So
I've definitely heard that. Right?
Yeah.
I'm sure it's very common.
So the child is traumatized because to the point that the child may even be threatened from eviction from home, or the withholding of pocket money, and all the guilt tripping. Or your brother or sister will lose her job, your dad will lose the job, you can't get a job. So that discourse, that I heard almost 30 years ago is still prevalent today, right? So I think that's a problem, and that's what I wanted to capture in that book, Self-Censorship, Singapore, Shame. Yeah.
What about the other one, Internet Politics?
Yeah. So Internet Politics is about overcoming the media. So
and this was written in 2002.
Yeah, well, when the internet
when
was
it was just nascent. Yeah. So tell us about that.
So there was a time. So Singapore was at a time where internet adoption was early. So it was only publicly available for society generally in 1995, and different countries, kind of brought it online, so to speak. Increasingly over the years, and I think we were kind of active around the late 90s, which is where I wrote the book. So you couldn't get the word out, right? Because mainstream media was fully, sort of shielded. The internet was the place where. So when I wrote the book and I began marketing it, I marketed it online. There were a few sort of websites that had critical essays about Singapore. One of them is Singaporeans for Democracy, well known at that time. So I kind of, advertised the book there, and then I had a PO box, and I asked people, okay, send me, I think it was $10 or $12, and another dollar or change for postage. And I said, if you send me the money in some form, check or whatever, to this PO box, I will mail you the book. And I got a fair bit of orders, including from the Ministry of Home Affairs, 2 copies. I always tell this story. Yeah. So the internet allowed me to jump the barrier. And I think the ability to jump the barrier continues to be relevant to this day.
Oh, yeah,
Yeah,
definitely.
yeah. And one of the things kind of, I'm experimenting this time with the elections, and you would not have seen me very active using this methodology in the perhaps last elections in 2020, is to go heavy on social media. Because I think by actually, I can do Canva, who can't do TikTok, right? I mean, so, or Reels, just shoot and, generate some captions and so on. So I've been doing that 2-3 times a day.
Yeah.
And I can do Canva on my mobile. So I find just by being present in the last 3 weeks, I'm getting a lift. I'm getting a lift, getting an awareness that I'm not just dormant, right? I'm actually active. And suddenly after all these years, James, is around and is doing this and other. But then, in the 2-3 weeks, there's a bit of a bounce. So 30 years on, I find you can still, surpass, mainstream media. And mainstream media is often very crowded. And also you can, surpass, institutional or social barriers, and just, put your voice out. So I think my second book was about how you can overcome censorship and self-censorship by, speaking directly to the audience. Yeah.
Well, I mean, it's even relevant now, right? This interview is happening.
Yes.
Right. It's trying to surpass that mainstream media discourse.
Yeah.
But anyway, what made you, I suppose, move beyond a very fruitful academic career and get yourself embroiled in politics? What was the spark that made you make that jump?
Yeah, I felt that when you write critically about politics or you discuss critically about politics, there's always an expectation in society that you go beyond, that you will eventually go to the electoral fray. So writing, whether it's essays or in journals or academic or speaking at seminars and so on, that expectation was always hoisted on you, especially if you were eloquent, whether in text or in oral form, about politics, especially in Singapore. So since there was that expectation, and when I looked at the space at that time in the late 90s, which was largely a civil society space, the opposition party space was very constrained, very tight. So there was that, emergence of some active civil society voices, and I was in that space. I decided to say more about politics, but also to organize activities like seminars, critical essays, set up a website, and these things. And I noticed there was a certain discomfort, even within the civil society. So I noticed a certain discourse of non-partisanship that was already sort of swirling around. It was fairly pronounced, and there were certain individuals in the civil society landscape who have been articulating and championing this non-partisan discourse. And over the years, I think they have managed to shape civil society in Singapore to kind of subscribe to this non-partisan discourse. Okay. And I think that's the Achilles heel of Singapore's civil society, because they have been kind of socialized into that non-partisan kind of discourse. I chose to move away from it because it was penultimate. Because if you are stuck there, you're not going to move. So I decided to move forward, not at a political party yet, but just to say, okay, it is the political, and it still can occupy or find a space within the civic space, because I think the civic space can also host the political. But civil society in Singapore, because they had this discourse of non-partisanship, was always wanting to push the political into opposition politics. Right? So I think that's the problem we still have today after 30 days. I think the political needs to find its legitimate and equitable space within the civic space, and there needs to be a pushback against this non-partisan discourse. Yeah. That is the Achilles heel. Yeah. And I think it's also generational. Yeah, so you got to kind of live them out, so to speak. And the voice that's able to articulate that and, claim the rightful space in the political. So that's because civil society was like that, I decided to set up the Think Center and do all those publications just to show that, the political had the space within the civil society landscape. So that was the first achievement. But then again, even then it's penultimate, because you really need to go to the next step. Yeah.
So that next step that you took was formally with the WP, the Workers' Party, right? What made you make that shift away from the Workers' Party to the SDP, which you've been with for?
Yeah, so I think to understand the story, I think one has to go back. I think the first step is why the move from the Think Center to the Workers' Party.
Yes.
Okay, so it all happened because of J.V. Jeyaretnam. So J.V. Jeyaretnam was made bankrupt, and he was looking for fundraising, and there was no crowdsourcing those days, right?
Yeah.
And we were as innovative as a bunch of young people at that time. And we had an army of, 12, maybe 15, I think. Still a good number, I think. We were operating very much both in Speaker's Corner as well as online. So we took up the challenge to organize the Safe JBJ rally. Yeah, and we raised the money, we got the license for the stadium, and I think we did raise some money, but was not enough to cover his bankruptcy. So a whole bunch of them, because of JVJ, were then kind of also socialized with him. And then we kind of marched into the Workers' Party for the first injection of young blood during the 2000s, 2001. Yeah, but of course, unknown to us, it was also a period where JV was also transitioning out of the Workers' Party, of which we were not privy to, because we were kind of literally kids at that time. Yeah.
So then what made you sort of move away from the WP into the SDP?
Yeah, so the 2006 elections is very well known. I was one of the most well-searched team for the elections. It had to do with the filing of the minority certificate, which I didn't need. I'm not a big fan of the minority certificate because my view is I'm nobody's minority. Yeah. So, and I think it's disrespectful to formally and institutionally call anyone a minority. So I have a political position against that. Forms are now online. In those days, in 2001, 2006, my impression of the election department was a very small room, very dark, full of dusty files and cobwebs. Because for a good 15 to 20 years, Singapore only experienced walkovers. So the election department was not a well-run, oiled machinery. It had to awaken from slumber. And we, the young people and the early ones who took part in the elections in 2001, 2006, jolted the elections department into awakening. The elections department is the way it is now because we, the citizens, the candidates and political parties, jolted it into operation. Up to today, even today, in this election, the election department is cumbersome. It's administratively cumbersome. The time notice is so short. If you were sitting in a political party, our experience yesterday, nomination day, and this is not the first time we experienced this in 2020, is the application, the services online for candidates and election agents is hung. You can't access it for several hours. We cannot apply for our rally site because you have to submit a rally site application, let's say 4 o'clock, and we can't. At 3:15, that it's showing error on the Singapore Police Force election rally site. So we had to dispatch our people to the ground, and then at 4:15 they will tell you, oh, but you haven't submitted it online, so you are not eligible to apply for election permit, but your system is hung. So that's the Singapore Police Force election, the microsite for election permits. It is also the same for candidate submission, right? We couldn't get our political donation certificate on time. We had to email them. There's a cache problem, we got to reboot, restart. It creates anxiety.
Yes.
Yeah. And the fact that you got to do this all in a very, very hurried way, I mean, what are we in a hurry for?
Yeah, I've always kind of wondered.
Yeah, what's the hurry? So
That weird
it's
1 hour window.
Yeah, it's rushed.
Yeah.
It makes no sense. So there's no comfort, right?
Yeah.
We just want enough time to do. You want a whole suite of things to be done. Make sure your server has the bandwidth, right? And you make sure that you give people humanly enough time. We are not asking for 3 days. We're asking for reasonable amount of time to upload our documents and so on and so forth. So the system is so rigid. So 25 years on, looking at a very dusty little dark room, which we call the elections department, to where it is now in its new premises with nice meeting rooms and so on, the fundamentals are still wrong. That is not to say that they've not embraced online elements, they put up data and things like that, but that the principle of making it efficient, right, that we would expect of any service for which, whether it's government or non-government service, that we would expect is not there.
Yes.
Yeah.
But I think maybe the question I'm really trying to ask here is, what is it about the SDP that drew you to it? What makes it stand out, beyond other opposition parties in Singapore?
I mean, the SDP, when I returned to Singapore, as I was working in Sweden and abroad, and I returned to Singapore in 2011, it was the party that was, very aligned with rights and principles and so on. I'm well aware that the party got there through a series of struggles. I think all of Singapore is aware of its civil disobedience route and so on. So it had character, it had grit, and it kind of spoke to me as well, because it's a principle, values-based party. It's not a party of political expedience. We don't get into it because it's politically expedient.
Yes.
We go there because it's principled, right? And if you look, right from the person who's 18 to the one who is in the late 70s, what is interesting about the SDP is it's intergenerationally homogeneous from a values point of view. So that there's a solid core.
Yes.
Yeah.
So you're saying, SDP is that party that will stick to its principles, even if it means taking a much longer road into Parliament.
I don't know whether my party colleagues will share those kinds of, articulation. I don't think the road is long for us now, because we've come already on a very long road.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah. So I think the principal element is there. For me, just looking at, this few weeks, we are getting there for sure. Yeah, yeah.
Definitely. So if that's what makes the SDP as a party different, what makes an SDP MP different?
So the SDP MP, and I think it matches what people want. Even this morning, I'm coming from a meet and greet in Sambawang at, just off Canberra MRT station this morning. An SDP MP comes from a historical space. It's a party of struggle. We scuffled to get to where we are. And we have grit. Right? We are just cut that way. Yeah. And if you hear what the public wants, and I'll just speak to the northern strategy, what people in Sembawang West want, the single seat, what people want in Sembawang GRC and Marsiling UT. They want someone to speak up without fear or favor. That's the ask. When we engage with the audience, the residents, they are not speaking to us about we will vote you in. They are telling us you need to get in and speak up on this issue. Cost of living, we got to get the GST down. That's the job they want us to do. So it's clear, right? And they want somebody with swagger who can scuffle over the key policy issues in Parliament, not simply intellectualize it. Because after all, the Singapore Parliament is a schoolyard, circled by elite school bullies.
That's a good way to put it, yeah.
And in order to keep the bullies in check, you must be able to scuffle over policies and rumble. And that's what SDP MPs will bring to you. We have a slate of 11. We've taken it purposefully. We've thought it out. We didn't want to go further because per candidate, we have a high ratio of volunteers. So with that, we are in a very, very strong place. Yeah. So if you look at the SDP campaign, our posters are up on time. If you, like I said, I'm coming from Sambawang this morning, the day after elections. Early this morning, we were there from 7 a.m. All the posters are up. The PAP posters are up, SDP's posters are up, poster to poster.
Yes.
There are 527 blocks in Sembawang GRC. We have cleared more than 90%. Even as we speak, at this time, there's a team continuing to give out flyers. That is the ratio of volunteers per candidate we have. So we have scheduled rallies for every night. And then, for a lunchtime rally. Now, of course, there are elements of booking, balloting, and all of that which is beyond our control. But we have the human resources and supporters to that.
That's
Yeah,
brilliant.
yeah.
So you've run 3 times already. This will be your 4th contest, right? Could you tell us what you have learned or how you changed over these years?
For me, I think for every election across, because I, participated over a range of group constituencies. On average, I would say for each election, between 40 to 50,000 people have voted for the constellation of candidates of which I was part of. So that's quite a bit of number that you gather over the years. So that means, you've touched people you have, aligned with their requests and their desires. So I think that I would see that as one achievement. I think the second achievement, of course, it's to be an inspiration for others, right? Because I started early, set the scene. A lot has come after. So it is without the first mover, right? In any situation, you won't have the rest.
Yeah.
The rest will not follow.
Of course. Yeah.
So I'm also happy to have, taken part in the early days, so that that has directly or indirectly inspired. And I think, and the third thing is to articulate very clearly the type of MP that Singaporeans want, right? They want MPs to speak up and stand up to a ruling party that's on its downward trajectory. It is not my analysis, it's the general analysis out there, right? And also enough is enough, yeah.
So actually on that note, right, if you could just maybe summarize for us the most impactful differences between the SDP and the PAP, what should make the average voter choose the SDP over the incumbent?
Our approach would really be around, policy difference.
Yep.
Yeah. So I'll just highlight a few things.
Yes, please,
so
yeah.
So one, our position is the cost of living is very high. We want the GST to come down from 9 to 7%. If we can afford it, to 5%. Even with that shift downwards, we know there will be enough billion-dollar surpluses to pay for the services we need without dipping into the reserves.
Yeah.
So that's our position. We've always advocated, from the earliest of days, a minimum wage. A minimum wage for us is a living wage, a wage on which people can live reasonably. And of course, the cost of living goes up and all of that. Our position around the minimum wage has always been to calibrate it to the level that gives us a cost of living. Many developed countries have a minimum wage or two. And then the thirdly is also about public housing. We know it's very expensive, and if I may just summarize the principle behind the policy, is we want to remove the land cost. So by removing the land cost, then it's largely just the cost of the structure that one pays off, and then of course at the end of the tenure, or if you feel you want to just give up the flat earlier on, then it goes to the HDB or any other government agency that will be responsible for managing it. So those are key specific policy principles that where we are. But of course, and then how we go about it in Parliament. So we will grip the issue. We will tackle it, question it, and press either for answer. Now, if we have the number, then obviously we are going to vote for policy change, right? But one step at a time. Yeah. I think it's very important for the SDP to break that critical bridge into Parliament, whether it's one or many. Yeah.
Definitely. So in Singapore's strange and unique political system, right, MPs are expected not just to be parliamentarians, but also estate managers. Right? Do you have a Sambawang plan for the residents?
Well, we had a Sembawang plan even when I contested in Sembawang GRC in 2011. It was two plans actually, a people's plan that was more about the environment and climate, and then a regeneration plan where we talked about how we can sort of introduce local businesses so people have, income and they can, contribute to part of the financial ecosystem within the estate. Moving fast forward, I just want to begin by saying that the People's Action Party passes off national plans as its own. The very famous or infamous lift upgrading scheme. It was a national program, but all the constituency, peddled it as their own. The PAP constituency peddled it on their own. And it worked for 2 elections until people, caught them out. And it couldn't work anymore. Estate upgrading is also part of that process. Now what we see in the last 2 elections is to fob off the URA plans as their own. MRT stations are passed off as a constituency plan. The building of, let's say in the Sambawang case, decommissioning the shipyard and then building a waterfront is, they won't tell you the timeline, but they pass off URA master plan as their own. I think that's the problem. So in the same way in 2011, we have, finalized our plan. I'll just give you a teaser here. Please come to the rally tonight, 7 p.m. Chua Chu Kang Stadium, SDP's first rally for GE2025. Details are all on the website. Come see my handle. But it's called the SDP's Sembawang GRC plan, putting the heart into the heartland. Because Sembawang GRC is one of the heartland estates.
Yeah.
But I think the heart is missing because we have focused so much on, a technocratic, urban-centric approach to development and estate management that we forget the people-centric approach. Yeah. So we have 9 key recommendations. I'll leave you 3. One is already out there. If you go to Sambawang in any other day, or like I did this morning, you will see many people biking. The reason why they bike is for many of the commuters, who live in clusters around the MRTs, they don't have last mile connectivity. So they use the bikes. And you will see many bikes, they will have a child seat. So people actually take their children on the bikes. Or they will also have, baskets in front for a little bit of grocery or shopping or just carrying something with them. You'll also see, platform delivery riders who use bikes.
Yeah.
Because they're just kind of delivering around the estate. So this is very clear. But an equipment that is so important, useful for people, doesn't have the storage facilities. So you will find, the bikes, poor things, they are kind of, cluttered along corridors, common corridors, stairwells, lumped together on the bottom of the flat. And if you go to the MRT station, in a place that clearly says no bikes should be parked, you'll have hundreds of bikes parked there because people cycle there in order to catch the train. There are many good bike management systems. We don't have to go far, just go to Japan, They're not very expensive, they are 2-tiered, they have shelter. I mean, you spend a few dollars on your bike, so, you do want to take care of it and give it the right protection. So that's what we're going to introduce. We want to incentivize people by having a nice, protected 2-tier system, bike parking management system in the flat, so that this will also compel people to kind of declutter bikes from the landings and the corridors, and also, you know, give them the safety and security. So it has to come with the proper CCTV and all of that. That's one thing. Similarly, you know, in the last mile connectivity, especially around the MRTs and all of that, of course, this requires studies, and therefore one of the elements of the town plan is regular town halls. So we will, you know, we'll have an idea, but we will touch base with the residents to calibrate their opinion. So the bike plan is there, and apart from just bike management, we also want to have a bike care center, because this is you know, equipment that, you know, people use, and we want them to have easy access to care. I see many bikes are not loved the way they should be, you know, because people don't have time. So if we can provide, you know, easy access to bike care, you know, they can be greased up nicely, you know, tires can be pumped, chains can be tightened, and if there's a, you know, paint or upholstery touch-up needed, you know, these things can be added on. So just a quick teaser there.
That's a quick teaser. I mean, we're going to see the plan really unveil.
And it's got great, beautiful icons as well. So yeah.
Wonderful. So actually, on that front, right, you've got a very thorough Sambawang plan, and you've got a very thorough manifesto as well. What hand do you have in constructing the policy aims of the SDP, right? And more broadly, how is the manifesto, how is the policy ideas of the SDP put together? What is the process behind it?
Our approach has been to develop policies over the years. So you will see on the website, our social media and all of that, the SDP will have very robust and updated policies on healthcare, on immigration, on transport, and public housing, just to name a few. But one of the fallacy of people who ask, oh, but you have these policies, but the policies are the same. That's an uncritical question, because they don't understand policy making, policy adjustment. The reason why SDP has a certain position, such as a minimum wage, is simply because the ruling party does not, right? Because it doesn't believe in enacting legislation to ensure guaranteed minimum wage. The SDP's position is clear, but where it's different is year on to year or review after review, we adjust the minimum wage as and when to match the cost of living or any other variables that we need to take into consideration. So it is this kind. So you know, we don't come together just because it's elections and then have a powwow and come up with a manifesto. We have regular conversations. If you look at our health policy, even as early as 2011, when we were working on the health policy paper, I was very much part of the discussion. Then we had a group of doctors who actually came, you know, and discussed and so on and so forth. So it's same with our economics paper. So we do have experts and all of that who come and discuss and, you know, contribute to the drafting. And these policy papers are regularly reviewed. I'm part of the policy unit, have been for some years, so that's one of how I contribute to it. But also, you know, just regular discussion, you know, reading the news and seeing where things are shifting, so that's how we contribute. In terms of, you know, communicating it to the voters, because of the nature of the media and so on, so these days the way, you know, and this is not just a trend in Singapore, it's globally, people tend to communicate key ideas of policies or manifestos in very, very simple documents. They use a lot of icons that represent sort of the key takeaways of policies.
Well, I mean, the SDP has this beautiful little acronym, right? Thrive. Right? So maybe you can tell us about that.
I think the key thing I want to say about it is, when it comes to cost of living, right? We have been told to tighten our belt. Here is some vouchers. We have to learn how to survive. Singapore is going into a difficult place. But after 60 years of rule, right, we don't want to survive. At this stage, we should be thriving. But our people are not, except for a small group of people who are aligned with the ruling party and the cronies who owns businesses for whom you may be working. Then you may articulate a question like, so what is wrong with the PAP? And then you'll have to self-reflect and say, who am I working for? Because you are working for someone who's aligned with the ruling party, you are getting a quantum, so therefore you ask, what is wrong with the PAP, instead of asking, what is wrong with the people? Or I mean, in terms of, what are the wrongs they are suffering from, the cost of living, right? It is because there are so many wrongs and missteps that's being done to citizens, which is why more people step up. There's a lady who volunteers in my pool of volunteers here for Sembawang GRC. She's in her early 70s. I've known her for the last election as well. She also helped out. She comes out for a couple of hours, gives out flyers, does meet and greet. And she was telling me, I wear the red, change maker t-shirt, and I take the train halfway across the island. That I get two sorts of questions, One, thumbs up, yeah, SDP. And two, why SDP? And her answer is a quick retort, why not? Right? Yeah. So I think we have come to that stage where support for the SDP is natural and commonplace, because people begin to understand what an SDP MP, or at least what is the ask for an SDP MP. And they want someone, whether it's he or she, to speak up purposefully and forcefully on the issues that matter. And that's why we are able, we have people all the way from the East Coast, Central Singapore, taking a train an hour and a half to come and volunteer. And I think that's magic. Yeah.
Okay, so I know you've got a crazy busy schedule. I don't want to keep you too much longer, but I just want to ask you one more question, which is, what are your hopes and aims for this general election?
Well, for the Singapore people, I hope they receive a multi-party parliament composed of parties and parliamentarians that will speak up for them on key issues, and forcefully, especially now when Singapore is going through uncharted waters with global and also national challenges. So I think that's my wish for Singaporeans, and my wish for SDP is we have 11 on the table. We have a slate of 11. I'm hoping that all 11 can be elected. And also on a good margin. And then coming down to Sembawang GRC, my wish is we can cross 50.1%. It doesn't matter how many parties, but as long as the SDP team can secure 50.1%, more if we can get it, there will be a sweet result. Yeah.
All right, best of luck with that, James Gomez. So good talking to you. If you've liked this interview, please do go and look for James Gomez. He is on TikTok, YouTube, Instagram, and Facebook, and you've got a website as well. Right?
As well, yeah.
Yeah, so go check that out. I was browsing through. There's some very interesting articles down there, and the TikTok videos are there as well. So do go and look out for James Gomez, as well as follow the rest of the SDP campaign trail along this GE. All right. Thank you so much for joining us. This has been Politically Speaking with the Online Citizen. And do join us. We're intending to have interviews like this with the candidates throughout the general election cycle. So please hit that like and share button, as well as subscribe, ring the bell on YouTube if you're following on YouTube to stay updated whenever we post these videos. So thank you so much for joining us.
A lot of people still don't know how Singapore's parliament actually works. So here's a quick explainer, especially with the general election coming up. Singapore uses a first-past-the-post system. That means in each constituency, the party or team with the most votes wins, even if it's just by one vote. After the election, the party with the most elected MPs gets to form the government. To control parliament, they need a simple majority. That's at least 49 out of 97 seats. Once they have that, they choose the Prime Minister and form the cabinet. A simple majority equal more than half the seats. That's 49 seats in the new 97-seat parliament. But a two-thirds supermajority is 65 seats. Why is that important? Because certain laws, especially changes to the constitution, need at least two-thirds of MPs to agree. If one party holds 65 or more seats, they can amend the constitution without needing support from other parties. Laws start as bills, which are proposed and debated in Parliament. If a majority of MPs vote yes, the bill becomes law. But again, if it's a constitutional change, it needs at least 65 MPs to agree, not just 49. So your vote doesn't just decide who gets in, it also affects how much power one party has. Now you know the difference between 49 and 65 seats and why it matters. Understanding how government is formed and how parliament works helps you see why every seat matters.